The cargo bay of Station Omega-7 hummed, with the monotonous drone of recycling systems and the distant thrum of engines. Corporal Maya Chun wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her gloved hand, leaving a streak of grime across her forehead. The crate in her arms weighed at least 60 pounds, but after 3 months of this mind-numbing duty, her muscles had adapted to the constant strain. Load, stack, secure, repeat. It was punishment duty, and everyone knew it. Chun, move your ass. Sergeant Rodriguez barked from across the bay. We've got 12 more pallets to clear before the Admiral's inspection. Maya bit back her response. 3 months ago, she would have snapped back with something clever and cutting. 3 months ago, she was still Corporal Maya Chun, communications specialist with a spotless record and a promising career ahead of her. That was before the Kepler Station incident. Before she'd questioned Captain Morrison's orders to abandon the civilian evacuation. Before she'd been branded insubordinate and reassigned to cargo, duty on the galaxy's most remote supply station. She hefted the crate higher and trudged toward the growing stack near the transport shuttle. The label read Medical Supplies, Frontier Colony 7, but something about its weight distribution felt off. Medical supplies shouldn't be this heavy, this dense. She'd loaded enough legitimate medical shipments to know the difference. But questioning cargo manifests was what had gotten her into trouble in the first place. The bay doors hissed open with a pneumatic wheeze, and Maya didn't bother looking up. Supply runs came and went every few hours. She was reaching for another crate when the familiar sound of military boots on metal decking made her pause. These weren't the casual footsteps of cargo workers or the hurried pace of junior officers. These boots moved with purpose, authority, and precision. Attention on deck. Someone shouted. Maya's head snapped up and her blood turned to ice. Admiral Marcus Reeves strode into the cargo bay, his silver hair gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights, his uniform immaculate despite the long journey from Command Central. Behind him walked a full entourage of high-ranking officers, their chests heavy with ribbons and decorations that Maya could only dream of earning. Admiral Reeves was a legend, the hero of the Titan Nebula, the man who'd single-handedly turned the tide of the Outer Rim War. Maya had seen his face on recruitment posters, in history vids, in the dreams of every soldier who'd ever hoped to make a difference. He was the kind of officer who could end careers with a glance or elevate unknowns to greatness with a single recommendation. Every person in the cargo bay snapped to attention, back straight, eyes forward. Maya quickly set down her crate and joined them, her heart hammering against her ribs. What was Admiral Reeves doing here? Station Omega-7 was a backwater supply depot, barely worth a lieutenant's attention, let alone the most decorated admiral in the fleet. The admiral's entourage spread out behind him as he surveyed the bay with sharp, calculating eyes. His gaze swept over the stacked supplies, the transport shuttles, the nervous faces of the cargo crew. Maya kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, hoping to blend into the background, to become invisible until this inspection was over. But then, Admiral Reeves stopped walking. Maya felt his presence before she saw him. A weight in the air that made her skin prickle. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at her to remain at attention, she turned her head slightly to the left. Admiral Reeves stood 3 feet away from her, his weathered face pale as death, his eyes wide with something that looked like shock. Recognition and impossible hope all rolled into one. His mouth opened slightly, as if he were about to speak, but no words came out. The cargo bay fell into absolute silence. Even the background hum of the station systems seemed to fade away. Maya's fellow workers remained frozen at attention, but she could feel their confusion radiating outward, like heat from a reactor core. Then Admiral Reeves did something that defied every protocol, every regulation, every tradition of military hierarchy that Maya had ever learned. He dropped to one knee, The sound of his knee hitting the metal decking echoed through the bay like a gunshot. His entourage gasped in unison, a collective intake of breath that spoke of shock, confusion, and barely contained panic. Colonel Hayes, the Admiral's aide-de-camp, stepped forward as if to intervene, but Reeves held up a hand to stop him. "My lady," Admiral Reeves whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "We thought you were dead." Maya's world tilted on its axis. The crate she'd been holding seemed to weigh nothing now, her arms numb with shock. "Sir, I think there's been a mistake. I'm Corporal Maya Chun, cargo detail." "I don't. You have your mother's eyes," the Admiral interrupted, his voice barely audible. "Princess Arya, the rebellion has been searching for you for 3 years." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Princess? Rebellion? Her mother had been a factory worker on New Shanghai Colony. Her father had died in a mining accident when she was 12. She was nobody special, just another grunt who'd made the mistake of having a conscience at the wrong moment. But as Admiral, Reeves stared at her with those intense, knowing eyes. Something stirred in the depths of Maya's memory. A flash of something, a woman's voice singing a lullaby in a language she didn't recognize. The scent of exotic flowers, the feeling of silk against her skin. The images were gone as quickly as they'd come, leaving her dizzy and disoriented. "Sir," she managed, her voice barely a whisper, "I don't know what you're talking about." "My name is Maya Chun. I was born on—" Admiral Reeves reached out slowly, his hand trembling, and touched the collar of her uniform. With gentle fingers, he pulled the fabric aside, revealing a small birthmark just below her left collarbone. It was shaped like a crescent moon, something Maya had always assumed was just a quirk of genetics. "The mark of the royal house," Admiral Reeves breathed. "I was there when you were born, Princess. I held you in my arms when you were barely an hour old." The cargo bay erupted in whispers and shuffling feet as the other workers tried to process what they were witnessing. Maya felt their stares like physical weight, pressing down on her from all sides. This had to be some kind of mistake, some cosmic mix-up that would be sorted out in a few minutes with embarrassed apologies all around. But then the crate slipped from her numb fingers. It hit the deck with a metallic crash that reverberated through the bay. The impact split the container open, spilling its contents across the floor. Maya stared down at the scattered items, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. These weren't medical supplies. Advanced plasma rifles lay scattered across the deck, their sleek barrels gleaming under the lights. Ammunition packs, tactical gear, and what looked like military-grade explosives had tumbled out alongside them. And there, mixed in with the weapons, were dozens of wanted posters bearing a face that Maya recognized with growing horror. Her own face stared back at her from the posters. But it wasn't the tired, work-worn features she saw in the mirror every morning. This was her face as it might have been, regal, confident, wearing a crown of silver and starlight. Below the image, in bold letters, were the words, "Princess Arya Valdris, heir to the throne, reward 10 million credits." Admiral Reeves rose slowly to his feet, his hand moving to the weapon at his side. But instead of drawing it, he simply rested his palm on the grip, a gesture that somehow managed to be both protective and threatening. "Your Highness," he said, his voice now carrying the full weight of his authority, "we need to get you out of here. Now." Maya Princess Arya stared at the scattered weapons and her own face on the wanted posters, her mind reeling. The cargo bay had become a tableau of frozen shock, every person present trying to process the impossible scene unfolding before them. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, broken only by the distant hum of the stations. Life support systems. Then the first explosion hit. The deck plates beneath Maya's feet bucked and rolled as a massive impact shook Station Omega 7 to its core. Emergency lighting flickered on, bathing everything in hellish red. The station's klaxons began their ear-splitting wail, and the automated voice of the station AI crackled over the intercom. Hull breach detected. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Admiral Reeves grabbed Maya's arm with surprising strength for a man his age. "They've found you," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to move. Now." Through the cargo bay's massive viewport, Maya could see space itself seeming to ripple and tear. One by one, massive Imperial dreadnoughts materialized from hyperspace, their hulls bristling with weapons that were already charging for another volley. The lead ship was easily 3 times the size of Station Omega-7, its black hull marked with the crimson insignia of the Imperial Navy. How? Maya gasped, still struggling to accept that any of this was real. "How did they know I was here?" "The same way we did," Admiral Reeves replied grimly, pulling her toward the bay's exit. "Your genetic signature. Every time you've had a medical scan, every time you've given blood for routine testing, the data has been feeding into Imperial databases. They've been searching for you just as long as we have." The cargo bay erupted into chaos as workers scrambled for emergency stations. Colonel Hayes, Admiral Reeves' aide, was barking orders into his comm unit, trying to coordinate an evacuation that everyone knew was hopeless. The other officers in the Admiral's entourage had drawn their weapons, forming a protective perimeter around Maya and their commander Dot as they reached the corridor outside the cargo bay. Maya's world exploded into violence. Laser fire erupted from both ends of the hallway, the distinctive whine of Imperial blasters filling the air with deadly energy. Admiral Reeves shoved Maya against the wall as his officers returned fire, their heavier military-grade weapons carving chunks out of the bulkheads where Imperial troops had taken cover. "The escape pods," Reeves shouted over the din of battle. "Docking Bay 7. We can." His words were cut off as a section of the ceiling collapsed, showering them with sparks and debris. Through the gap, Maya could see Imperial shock troopers rappelling down from the upper levels, their black armor gleaming in the emergency lighting. But something strange was happening to Maya as the battle raged around her, as death filled the air with its acrid smell. She found herself moving with a fluidity and precision that she'd never possessed before. When an Imperial trooper rounded the corner ahead of them, Maya's hand moved to the fallen officer's sidearm before her conscious mind had even registered the threat. The weapon felt familiar in her grip, as natural as breathing. She fired 3 shots in rapid succession, each one finding its mark with impossible accuracy. The trooper dropped, his armor smoking from the precise hits to weak points that Maya somehow knew existed. Admiral Reeves stared at her with something approaching awe. "Your training is coming back," he said. "The memory blocks are breaking down under stress." "What training?" Maya demanded, but even as she asked the question, more fragments were surfacing. The weight of a sword in her hand, the rhythm of combat forms practiced until they became instinct. A woman's voice, her mother's voice, teaching her that a true ruler must be prepared to fight for her people. They fought their way through 3 more corridors, leaving a trail of Imperial bodies in their wake. Maya's suppressed skills continued to emerge, each engagement revealing new layers of deadly competence that she'd never known she possessed. She moved like a dancer, like a predator, like someone born to command and trained to kill. But their luck couldn't hold forever. They reached Docking Bay 7 to find it already occupied. Imperial troops had beaten them there, setting up a defensive perimeter on the escape pods. Admiral Reeves counted at least 20 soldiers, all in full combat armor, all with clear fields of fire across the bay. "We'll have to fight our way through," Colonel Hayes said, checking his weapons charge. "Sir, if you can get the Princess to Pod 7, we can hold them off long enough for you to launch." Admiral Reeves nodded grimly, But before he could respond, Maya grabbed his arm. "Wait," she said. "Something's wrong. This is too easy." "Easy?" Hayes stared at her incredulously. "Princess, we're outnumbered 4-1, trapped in a docking bay with no cover. And—" "No," Maya interrupted, her newly awakened tactical instincts screaming warnings. "If they wanted me dead, they would have just destroyed the station from orbit. They're hurting us. This is exactly where they want us to be." Admiral Reeves' eyes widened with understanding. A trap. But why would they? The answer came in the form of slow, deliberate applause echoing through the docking bay. The Imperial troops parted, creating a clear path for a figure that made Maya's blood turn to ice. Colonel Hayes stepped into view. But this wasn't the same man who had been at Admiral Reeves' side moments before. This Hayes wore the black and silver uniform of an Imperial intelligence officer, his chest decorated with ribbons that spoke of campaigns against rebel forces. His smile was cold, predatory, and utterly without mercy. "Bravo, Your Highness," he said, his voice carrying easily across the bay. "Truly a performance worthy of your bloodline. Did you really think we didn't know where you were?" Admiral Reeves' face went ashen. "Hayes, you bastard." "How long?" "From the beginning," Hayes replied casually. "Every rebel cell, every safe house, every desperate plan to restore the monarchy. We've known about all of it. The rebellion exists because we allow it to exist. It serves as a very convenient way to identify and eliminate anyone still foolish enough to believe in the old ways." Maya felt the world spinning around her. "The Admiral. Is he—" "Oh, Admiral Reeves is quite genuine in his loyalty to your family," Hayes said with mock sympathy. "Which is precisely why he's been so useful. Every time he thought he was getting closer to finding you, he was actually helping us narrow down the search parameters. Every rebel he contacted, every safe house he established, every plan he made, all of it fed directly back to Imperial intelligence." The Admiral's hand moved to his sidearm, but Hayes was faster. The Imperial officer's blaster was already trained on Reeves' chest, the weapon's charge indicator glowing a malevolent red. "I wouldn't," Hayes said softly. "You see, Admiral, you still have a role to play in this little drama. The princess needs to understand exactly how thoroughly she's been outmaneuvered." But as Hayes spoke, Maya noticed something that made her heart race with sudden hope. The data chip that Admiral Reeves had pressed into her palm during their escape was growing warm against her skin. More than warm, it was actually glowing, a soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The chip was interfacing with something. But what? Hayes continued his gloating monologue, but Maya was no longer listening. She was remembering fragments of her father's voice, teaching her about the hidden systems built into every major Imperial installation. Systems that could only be activated by someone with the proper genetic markers. Someone with royal blood. The chip pulsed brighter, and Maya felt a connection forming, not just with the station's computers, but with something far more vast and powerful. A network that had been sleeping for 3 years, waiting for the right signal to wake up, waiting for her. The data chip's glow intensified against Maya's palm, its warmth spreading up her arm like liquid fire. Hayes continued his monologue, savoring what he believed was his moment of complete triumph. But Maya could feel something vast and ancient stirring in response to her touch. The station systems were recognizing her, acknowledging her presence in ways that went far deeper than simple genetic scanning. "You see, Princess," Hayes said, gesturing grandly with his weapon, "your father was brilliant, but he made one critical error. He believed that loyalty could be bought with ideals, with honor, with the promise of a better tomorrow. But the Empire understands a much simpler truth. Loyalty follows power, and power flows to those willing to seize it." Admiral Reeves kept his hands visible, but Maya could see the tension in his shoulders. the way his eyes tracked the positions of every Imperial soldier in the bay. He was calculating odds, looking for an opening that they both knew didn't exist. 20 armed troops in full combat armor against 3 rebels with sidearms. The mathematics of survival were brutally simple. The rebellion was never real, Hayes continued, his smile growing wider. Oh, the people were real enough. Their beliefs, their sacrifices, their deaths, all quite genuine. But from the moment your father fell, every rebel cell, every safe house, every desperate plan has been orchestrated by Imperial intelligence. We've been playing a game of chess where we control both sides of the board. Maya's mind reeled as the implications hit her. Every person who had died fighting for the Restoration, every family torn apart by the war, every act of heroism and sacrifice, all of it had been manipulated, controlled, turned into a weapon against the very cause they died for. The beauty of it, Hayes said, warming to his theme, is that we didn't even have to hunt down the rebels. They came to us. Every time someone new joined the cause, every time a cell tried to make contact with others, they walked straight into our web. Admiral Reeves here has been our most effective recruiter, though he never knew it. The Admiral's face had gone gray with horror and understanding. The Kepler Station incident, he whispered. You knew Maya would question the evacuation order. You knew she'd be punished and transferred here. Of course we did, Hayes laughed. We've been monitoring her for months, waiting for the right moment to activate this particular operation. Her assignment to cargo duty wasn't punishment. It was positioning. We needed her here, in this specific place, at this specific time. The data chip pulsed again, and suddenly Maya understood why. The cargo she'd been loading wasn't just weapons, it was a complete Imperial armory. Enough firepower to equip a small army. But more than that, the manifests she'd been processing, the shipping routes she'd been tracking, all of it had been feeding data into a network that was now responding to her genetic signature. But why? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. If you've known where I was all along, why not just kill me? Hayes' smile turned predatory. Because, Your Highness, you're worth far more to us alive than dead. You see, there are still pockets of genuine resistance out there, cells that we haven't been able to penetrate, worlds that refuse to fully submit to Imperial rule. They're waiting for a sign, a symbol to rally around. And what better symbol than the lost princess, finally returned to lead them to victory? The horrible truth began to dawn on Maya. You want to use me as bait. Precisely, Hayes said with obvious satisfaction. We'll stage a dramatic rescue. Spread word that Princess Arya has returned to claim her throne. Every remaining rebel, every hidden loyalist, every person still foolish enough to believe in the old ways will come crawling out of their holes to join your glorious revolution. And when they do, you'll slaughter them all, Admiral Reeves finished, his voice hollow with despair. Every last one, Hayes confirmed. The final purge, the end of the old bloodline's influence forever. And the best part? You'll be leading them to their deaths personally, Your Highness. The last act of the royal family will be the complete destruction of everyone who ever believed in them. Maya felt rage building in her chest, a fury so pure and hot that it threatened to consume her entirely. But beneath the anger, something else was stirring. The data chip had grown almost too hot to hold, and she could feel the station systems responding to her presence in ways that Hayes clearly didn't understand. There's just one problem with your plan, Maya said quietly. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what's that? You assume my father was as naive as you think he was. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a heartbeat later. But in that moment of absolute darkness, everything changed. The data chip's glow had become blinding, and Maya felt a connection snap into place that was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. It wasn't just the station's computers responding to her. It was something far more vast and sophisticated. The station's AI spoke, but its voice was different now. Warmer, more human, tinged with an accent that Maya recognized from her fragmentary memories. "Royal override accepted," the AI announced in a voice that sounded remarkably like her mother's. "Welcome home, Your Highness. Initiating Protocol 7. Hayes spun around, his weapon tracking wildly as blast doors began slamming shut throughout the docking bay. The Imperial troops found themselves suddenly separated, cut off from each other by barriers of reinforced terrestrial. Emergency force fields sprang to life, creating a maze of energy barriers that turned their tactical advantage into a liability. "What the hell?" Hayes began. But his words were cut off as the bay's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Imperial soldiers found themselves floating helplessly, their heavy armor now a disadvantage as they struggled to orient themselves in the shifting gravitational fields. Maya felt knowledge flooding back into her mind, not just memories, but understanding. Her father hadn't just been a king. He'd been a master strategist who had spent years preparing for the possibility of his own downfall. The data chip wasn't just a key. It was a trigger for a network of hidden systems that had been sleeping throughout the Empire, waiting for the day when his daughter would need them. "Protocol 7 was my father's final gift," Maya said, her voice carrying a new authority that made even Hayes step back. "Every major Imperial installation, every fleet depot, every command center, they all have hidden subroutines buried deep in their core systems. Subroutines that can only be activated by someone with royal genetic markers." The station shuddered as massive energy discharges began firing from hidden weapon emplacements. Through the viewport, Maya could see the Imperial dreadnoughts suddenly finding themselves under attack from their own supply depot. Turbolaser batteries that had been disguised as communication arrays were now pouring devastating fire into the fleet's flanks. But Hayes wasn't finished. Even as his carefully laid plans crumbled around him, he kept his weapon trained on Admiral Reeves. "Very impressive, Your Highness," he snarled. "But you're forgetting something important. Your father may have been clever, but he's not here to protect you now." The Imperial officer's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, Admiral Reeves threw himself forward. The blast meant for Maya caught him full in the chest, the energy bolt burning through his uniform and into the flesh beneath Dodd as the Admiral collapsed. His hand pressed something into Maya's palm, not another data chip, but a small device that looked like a communicator. With his dying breath, he managed to whisper 4 words that changed everything. "The real rebellion isn't who you think. Trust no one, except." His voice faded, but the device in Maya's hand was already activating, displaying a message that made her blood run cold. The real rebellion wasn't the network that Hayes had been manipulating. It was something else entirely, something that had been hidden even from the Admiral himself, and according to the message, now scrolling across the device's screen, they had been waiting for his signal to begin the final phase of their plan. Admiral Reeves' blood pooled on the deck plates as his final words echoed in Maya's mind. The device he'd pressed into her palm displayed a message that made her heart race. "Phoenix Protocol activated. Awaiting royal confirmation. Emperor's location confirmed. Flagship Dominion. Extraction window 47 minutes. Maya stared at the screen in shock. Emperor? Her father was supposed to be dead, executed 3 years ago in a public ceremony that had been broadcast across the galaxy. But the device's biometric scanners were absolute. They detected her father's unique genetic signature aboard the massive Imperial flagship that hung in space above them. Hayes struggled to his feet, his face twisted with rage as he watched his perfect plan disintegrating around him. The station's hidden weapons continued their devastating assault on the Imperial fleet, but the Dominion remained untouched, protected by shields that could withstand the combined firepower of a dozen worlds. "Impossible," Hayes snarled, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead where falling debris had struck him. "Your father is dead. I watched him die myself." "No," Maya said, her voice growing stronger as more memories flooded back. "You watched someone die. Someone who looked like him, someone who was willing to sacrifice everything to give the real rebellion time to prepare." She looked down at the device's display, where tactical information was streaming in from hidden sources throughout the Imperial fleet. The Phoenix Protocol. My father's ultimate contingency plan. The truth was staggering in its scope and audacity. For 3 years, while Hayes and Imperial intelligence had been playing their elaborate game with the false rebellion, the real resistance had been growing in the shadows. Not a network of cells and safe houses, but something far more dangerous: Imperial officers, fleet commanders, even members of the Imperial Council who had never forgotten their true loyalty. They had been waiting for this moment, for the signal that would tell them their true emperor still lived and his heir had returned to claim her birthright. The entire Third Fleet, Maya breathed, reading the tactical display. Admiral Korath, General Voss, even Governor Thane on Coruscant, they're all part of it. Hayes' face went pale as he realized the magnitude of what was happening. "You're lying. The Empire is unified, loyal. We crushed every trace of resistance." "You crushed the resistance you were allowed to see," Maya corrected. "While you were busy chasing shadows and manipulating rebels who didn't even know they were being used. The real loyalists were infiltrating your ranks, rising through your hierarchy, gaining access to your most sensitive operations." The station shuddered again as another wave of Imperial reinforcements dropped out of hyperspace. But these ships weren't firing on the station. They were turning their weapons on their own fleet. The space around Station Omega-7 erupted into the largest naval battle the galaxy had seen since the original Civil War. Maya watched through the viewport as star destroyers that had served the Empire for decades suddenly revealed their true allegiance. The Imperial fleet found itself fighting a war on 2 fronts, caught between the station's hidden defenses and the betrayal of their own ships. But the Dominion remained untouchable, its massive bulk protected by layers of shields and defensive systems that made it virtually impregnable. And somewhere aboard that ship, her father waited in whatever prison they'd constructed for him. 43 minutes, Maya said, reading the countdown on the device. That's how long the Phoenix ships can maintain their assault before Imperial reinforcements arrive from the core worlds. Hayes laughed bitterly. 43 minutes to do what? That ship has a crew of 50,000 and defenses that could stop a fleet. You'll never reach him. Maya looked down at Admiral Reeves' body, at the man who had given everything to see her restored to her rightful place. Then she looked at the scattered weapons from the cargo containers, at the tactical display showing her the impossible odds they faced. "You're right," she said quietly. "I can't reach him, but I don't have to." She activated the device's communication array, broadcasting on frequencies that only the Phoenix Protocol ships would recognize. Her voice carried across the battle, reaching every loyalist who had waited 3 years for this moment. "This is Princess Arya Valdris, rightful heir to the throne," she said, her words cutting through the chaos of battle. "My father lives, imprisoned aboard the Dominion. I could order you to attempt a rescue, to sacrifice yourselves in a hopeless assault on an impregnable fortress. But that's not what he would want, and it's not what the galaxy needs." She paused, watching as the battle raged around them. Imperial ships turned on each other with devastating fury. Years of hidden resentment and suppressed loyalty finally given voice through the thunder of turbolaser fire. Instead, "I'm going to do what my father taught me a true ruler must always be willing to do. I'm going to make the hard choice." Maya's fingers moved across the device's controls, accessing systems that had been hidden for 3 years, waiting for this moment. The station's main reactor began cycling up to maximum power. drawing energy from every available source. The Dominion shields can stop any external attack, she continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. But they can't stop a hyperspace collision. Station Omega-7 is equipped with experimental jump drives designed to allow supply depots to relocate quickly in case of attack. Hayes' eyes widened with horror as he realized what she was planning. You're insane. A hyperspace collision at this range will destroy everything within 100,000 kilometers. Your own ships, the station, everyone aboard, including me, Maya finished. But it will also free my father and cripple the Empire's most powerful ship. The Phoenix fleet will survive. They're already pulling back to minimum safe distance. And when the galaxy sees that the royal family is willing to sacrifice everything for freedom, the real rebellion will begin. She looked directly into the device's camera, knowing that her words were being recorded, that they would be broadcast across every world in the galaxy within hours. People of the Empire, she said, her voice carrying the authority of generations of rulers. For 3 years, you've lived under the boot of tyrants who stole your freedom and murdered your rightful leaders. But the crown endures. The bloodline survives. And today, we reclaim what was always ours. The hyperspace drives began their final charging sequence, reality itself starting to bend around the station as massive energies built toward the critical threshold. Maya could feel the fabric of space-time warping, could sense the approaching moment when Station Omega-7 would tear itself free from normal space and hurtle toward its target at impossible speeds. This is Princess Arya Valdris, she said, her final words carrying across the galaxy as the drives reached critical mass. The crown returns today. Long live the Empire. Long live freedom. Long live. The universe exploded into light as Station Omega-7 vanished from normal space, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of billions, the fury of the oppressed, and the unbreakable will of a princess who had chosen duty over life, sacrifice over safety. In the blinding flash that followed, as the Dominion shields collapsed under the impossible energies of a hyperspace collision, as the most powerful ship in the Imperial fleet broke apart like a child's toy, one thing became absolutely clear to every person watching across the galaxy. The war for freedom had begun anew. And this time, there would be no surrender. The crown had returned, and with it, the promise that tyranny's reign was finally coming to an end.